Welcome to part two, starting your own law firm with practical law. We are joined today by representatives from Thomson Reuters, Robert Hull, Michael Plambeck, and David Von Ebers, as well as Alfreda Coward, the chair of the Solo Small Firm and General Practice Division. We are here to learn more about practical law. Now, before we proceed, we will be launching a poll to get a sense of our audience familiarity with practical law. The poll should be launching shortly, and the poll will read, how familiar are you with practical law? So please take a few moments to answer the poll. Great, thank you all for participating. Bob, I will now turn the program over to you.
Excellent, thank you, Shakayla. Thanks for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to present to you all today. My name is Bob Hull. I'm a senior legal editor at Practical Law, which is a division of Thomson Reuters. I am a barred attorney in California, New York, and Connecticut, and came to Practical Law to be in charge of the California build, and now I'm in charge of the multi-state build, which is any jurisdictions where we use external contributors. We use attorneys across the nation with expertise in particular states to help us build content, so I'm in charge of that process. I was a trusts and estates attorney in private practice for 8 years before I came to Practical Law, and I was at kind of a smallish, medium-sized firm of about 25 to 30 attorneys with different practice areas. So it's really a pleasure to speak to you in law school. I remember second year, third year of law school, summer externships, thinking about what we were going to do, what I was going to do, what all our classmates were going to do after law school. Some wanted to be attorneys, go into firms. Others just really had no idea what they wanted to do. So I'd want to introduce you to Practical Law with Dave and Mike today, because it's sort of, it's a product that's out there that's really exciting. It was hugely popular in the United Kingdom, and then it came over to the United States. And it kind of flips the traditional way of doing legal research on its head. You know, in law school, you do lots of IRAC and analysis and legal. You're answering legal questions and you're looking at cases. But this really comes at the law from a perspective of, what do I need to do to get this task done? Rather than, how do I research this obscure legal issue? What do I need to do to file a complaint? What do I need to do to draft an estate plan for a client? If I have someone who walks in the door who is a person who owns a commercial building and is entering into leases with tenants, how do I engage that client? How do I even know if this is a matter that I feel comfortable engaging? So we're going to run you through Practical Law, just show you the ins and outs, and it was really designed to come at the law from that perspective. Very practical, very task-oriented. So we're going to open up our second poll, which is, what is your primary reason for attending this program? Do you want to open your own firm? Are you one of those brave souls that's like, I want to work for myself, I want to create my own business? Are you like me, sort of like, I don't really know what's out there? I kind of never wanted to entertain opening my own business because frankly, I wanted to build some expertise before I did that. Also, when I came to Practical Law, I knew a little bit about it, but very little. So are you here just to learn a little bit more about Practical Law? Okay, wow, I see we have a lot of brave souls who want to open your own firm, and a lot of brave souls who are considering opening their own firm. So good for you. Excellent, good to know. So now I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of Practical Law. So hold on while I share my screen. And then maybe Mike or Dave can let me know if the screen is up.
Yep, it's up.
Excellent. So this is the Westlaw Classic screen. And for those of you who know Westlaw, I'm sure you're familiar with this. You've spent more time on the screen than you care to. For those who use LexisNexis, it's kind of a similar interface. So to get to Practical Law, if you were a subscriber, it's very simple. All you do is click the scroll down menu and you go to Practical Law. Because both Westlaw and Practical Law are divisions of Thomson Reuters, and they're both integrated with each other as well. And that's one of the benefits of Practical Law, one of the really cool things, which I'll show you in a sec. So here we are in the Practical Law home screen. And again, coming at it from the perspective of what do I need to know to do a task? If you're on Westlaw and you want to know about shareholder agreements, you type in shareholder agreements, you get 10,000 results, and maybe your result is buried somewhere deep. This is organized and presented in a very task-oriented way. So for example, I am a trust and estates guy. Mike is real estate, Dave is litigation. So for now, if I were interested in trusts and estates, if I wanted to open a trust and estates practice or start practicing, and I really had limited exposure to it, a lot of these resources would help you get up to speed. There's a tension in the solo small firm setting. You don't want to turn down work because it's up to you. You're the marketer, you're the attorney, you're working with billing, you're doing everything. So you want to capture that work. Also, you may have friends that are referring work to you. So you got to ask yourself, what can I handle? What am I competent? If I don't feel comfortable in a certain area, can I build my expertise enough to handle this matter? Practical Law can help you screen these matters because we have materials from beginning introductions. We have resource types that Dave will go into a little bit more. Practice notes, which are subject area documents that just talk about a particular area of the law. Standard documents, your forms, checklists, toolkits. One of the most helpful resources, and I'm going to just talk about this because toolkits are an aggregator. And again, they talk about specific tasks. So for example, beginning in estate planning representation. If I want to start to represent a client, here is a beginning estate planning representation toolkit for a single individual. Here's one for an individual with a spouse or partner. So if I were to click on a toolkit, you get a little introduction about what I need to know when beginning an estate planning representation. And here are the documents. Here's a questionnaire for a single individual, an agenda, and each of these documents, Dave will go into specific documents in a bit more detail, but each of these documents talk about everything you need to know in order to use these particular documents. Here's an engagement letter. Should you do an hourly fee arrangement, a flat fee arrangement, etc. Here are ethics issues you need to know. So again, task-oriented and organized in a way that you ask yourself, what is the task I need to get done? And especially in these toolkits, you can go, am I doing charitable trust planning? Am I estate planning in kind of an emergency? Hey, I need a quick power of attorney document. Are you doing life insurance trust planning? And you can see we have many jurisdictions. Are there issues with coronavirus? Are we doing revocable trust planning? Are we doing will planning, etc.? And you can click into any of these toolkits. So for example, if I'm in New York and I want to do revocable trust planning for an individual with a spouse or partner, and it's a relatively simple plan, I can click in here, have all of the documents curated and go exactly to the ones that I would need to use, both, number one, as a research tool, and number two, the actual documents you need to draft with information directly related to what do I need to know to draft this section of the documents. Those are called drafting notes. There's also a legal operations and professional development area that Mike will discuss later. And this talks all about behind the scenes, forget the law part. What do I need to run a firm? How do I bill? What are the issues that I need to consider? What about leasing equipment, leasing a copier? How do I do all these things? What do I need to know in order to figure out, A, if this is something that I feel comfortable doing, or B, I'm hell-bent on doing it, I wanna go, and I need things to get me up to speed on the issues that I need in the shortest amount of time. So Practical Law puts everything right at your fingertips. It's a different way of thinking about legal research. You don't go to that big 900-page treatise in the back looking for that one little issue. It's very much about completing the task in front of you, or deciding whether the task in front of you is one that you feel comfortable doing. Also, and one of my 2 points before I pass it off to Dave, integration is the key. As you'll see, all of these documents integrate directly with Westlaw. So when we're looking at will execution, what do I need to know to execute a will in a particular state? We give you the substantive law. It's got a citation. You click on the citation, takes you directly to Westlaw. You don't have to search through for the correct statutes. It gives you that right there. And then it gives you key issues I need to know when executing a will. What if the person executing the will is not capable of executing the will? They're mentally there, but physically they can't do it. What do I do? How do I go about doing that? Can I have someone execute it on his or her behalf? And then the last thing I want to say before passing it off to Dave is our maintenance process. As Dave will show you, every resource is either says it's maintained, and by maintained, the law is current. If there's a law change coming up, we prepare for that, and when that law change happens, we republish those materials. You never have to worry about whether materials are out of date. I work with contributors as well. There are other kinds of resources called dated resources, and you'll see law stated as of, and it gives you the exact date, so there's never a doubt as to whether you're looking on something that's currently maintained. When was it last maintained? We list the issues that when it is maintained at the bottom, it says, here were the changes that were made. We try to make this as helpful and as practical for you guys to be able to complete your task and know at the end of it, you've done it right, the law is right, and you can rely and depend on Practical Law to keep those documents updated for you. So with that, we'll dig more deeply into one area of practice. Dave is a litigation specialist, and he'll talk to you more about himself. And hopefully, Dave, you'll share your screen, take it back from me.
I will do that, yes. Thanks so much, Bob. I appreciate that.
Excellent.
My name is David Von Ebers. I've been with Practical Law as a senior litigation editor or senior legal editor in the litigation practice in the state of Illinois. Before I came here in 2016, just so you get a little sense of my background, I was in litigation in both in the city of Chicago and the suburbs for about 29 years, and the last 15 of which I was in solo practice. So this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart, let's say, and I certainly have a lot of familiarity with it. And so one thing that sort of pivots off of some of Bob's comments was that people come into solo practice in a lot of different ways. Some people like me, I was an attorney in various firms up to the partner level for about 14 years before I decided to open my own firm in 2001. But I'm impressed with the number of people who are considering that right off the bat. That's amazing. I hope you have great success with that. With that, can you see my screen now? Or have I not successfully shared it? Here we go. You can see it now? Okay, I got the thumbs up. So, Bob showed you the general landing page for Practical Law, and this is the litigation page. So I'll just show you how we navigate here real quickly. If you're on the main page, the main Practical Law page, You see the practice areas, litigation is over here. So we'll click into that, and that's where we'll start out. Before we get into this, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around on my outline here, but before we get into this, we also have another poll question to ask, which relates to what areas of law that you're primarily interested in. And this kind of will pick up on the discussion that we had about you need to be able to do more than just one area very often, because different kinds of things are going to come into the firm. But let's take a moment to answer that poll question first. So it looks like, if I'm reading the results correctly, it looks like a slight plurality favors litigation. We've got trust and estates, business and corporate, real estate, and other. So that'll be a good way to pick up from where Bob left off and go into some of our litigation content. But even if, as I was starting to say, even if you're not necessarily planning to do litigation as your main area of focus, one of the things that you will frequently discover in the practice, no matter what you're doing in solo practice, is that things are going to come in the door that you don't necessarily anticipate. You might be a corporate lawyer or a real estate lawyer, but someone will come to you with a litigation matter, or you might concentrate in litigation as I did, but someone will come to you with a real estate matter or a business transaction that they want you to handle. And as Bob said, there's a tension between taking on everything that comes in the door because you want to be able to keep the lights on and pay the bills, but also, your ethical obligation to handle matters competently and to be up to speed and know what you're doing when you take on a matter. And I think that this is, we'll see as we walk through here, you'll see that I think we've got a lot of good content to help that. We like to say that, practical law is sort of like the attorney down the hall that you can go talk to if a question arises. A client calls you with something that you're unfamiliar with. In a firm setting, you may not have handled the matter before, but the person next to you may be more familiar with it. So you go knock on their door and you sit down and you talk it through. In solo practice, you don't necessarily have that. You might have a colleague who's got some familiarity that you can call or email, but there's not necessarily that person next door to you. What we do provide, though, is that same kind of guidance that you would get from an experienced litigator or an experienced corporate attorney or real estate attorney. So for example, whether you're a litigator or whether you're a real estate lawyer and a litigation matter comes to the door, I'll just kind of walk you through some of the things you might be able to do to grapple with, can I handle this? And if you determine that you can, how to do it competently and thoroughly and really live up to your ethical obligations to your client. So on the litigation homepage here, if you look at the top of the screen, the main tab is topics. And you'll see on the topics, we have some sort of general procedural areas that sort of walk you through the general, each step of litigation, commencement and pleadings, discovery, motions, all the way through judgment and appeals. We have some specific procedural topics that may fall outside of your regular litigation practice, like arbitration, ADR, class action, that sort of thing. And then over here on the right, we also have some substantive areas that we delve into. Pardon me, antitrust, commercial litigation. This is a new bill that we've rolled out in recent months. It's very, very thorough on a number of areas of business litigation. We have employment litigation, intellectual property, securities, white collar crime, and investigation. So these are the general topics that we have across jurisdictions and across the types of resources that we have. Under the resource tab, these are the general categories, and Bob touched on some of this. We have practice notes that are very detailed, practical guides to how you accomplish a task, standard documents that are the actual document you might prepare for a lawsuit, or if you're drafting a lease or a corporate document, standard clauses, which, as the name implies, are individual clauses that would go into a larger document, checklists that help you, walk through the steps of accomplishing a particular task, and then toolkits, which is what Bob was talking about a bit earlier, where all of these different types of resources are gathered. We also have content organized by jurisdiction. You'll see a number of states here listed: California, Florida, Georgia, Illinois. These are states where we have a large amount of content, and they are, for the most part, maintained resources so that they're constantly being updated and reviewed to make sure that they're as current as they can be. We also have resources in a variety of states in addition to these major categories, these major states. And then we have some resources that are designed for a national and a federal perspective, some specific, and let's say in the litigation area, some specific to federal court, some that are more general, but would be helpful for you no matter where you're practicing. Just very quickly, we also have some widgets on the right-hand side, and these change from time to time. But you'll notice up at the top, the impact of COVID-19. We have a wide variety of resources that address how the pandemic has affected different areas of the practice, and in particular in litigation, so that these are very, very up-to-date, up-to-the-minute resources that will tell you, for example, if you're in one of these main states, how has the pandemic affected litigation practice in Illinois or California? Or on the national federal level. We also have a nationwide resource that pools information from across the country on how COVID is affected. So that just gives you an idea of how up to date some of this material is. So let's go to a hypothetical situation. You're in solo practice and someone comes to you with a lawsuit, right? And maybe the lawsuit involves parties from different states. Since I'm in the Midwest, I'm outside of Chicago, I'll say, let's say you have parties located in the state of Illinois and in the state of Michigan. And you're not entirely sure which parties you're going to bring into the case, and you're not entirely sure where you're going to bring the lawsuit. So one thing you might want to find out up front is, what are the statutes of limitations that apply to your claims, let's say in Michigan versus Illinois? We have these state Q&A resources, which are sort of a black letter guide to various areas of the law, and they are state specific. So one of the categories we have under state Q&As are these statute of limitations documents. So let's just click into that for a moment so you get a sense of what's there. It'll take just a second because our internet is always funky. So you'll see that for every state, there is a Q&A that covers statutes of limitations. Let's look at Michigan for a moment, so you get a sense of how these things look. So this is, as Bob was mentioning, this is a dated resource. It was last updated in July 2020. So you have a sense of how up to date the content is. And it goes through various different types of causes of action. It so happens that the limitations resources are all organized alphabetically. So let's say you have a breach of contract claim, right? This will tell you what the statute of limitations is in the state of Michigan. For written and oral contracts, typically are 6 years. It has citations to legislative enactments, cases that help interpret the statutes. So you can click on the statutory citation or the case, and it'll take you right to that document in Westlaw. It's moving a little bit slowly, but so here's the statute that tells you the statute of limitations for a breach of contract claim. And here is a case interpreting that. And it brings you right to the page of the case that's relevant to the issue. So we'll get out of those for a second. So going back to the question of where you're going to bring this claim, you've got a potential breach of contract claim with parties in 2 different states, and you're not entirely sure which state you're going to bring it in. So you want to have an idea of how does the law vary from one location to the other. So you've got this compare states button here, right? Click on this, and it brings up all of the questions that you will find in each of these Q&As on the statute of limitations issue. We want to know about breach of contract. So select the breach of contract question, scroll down where it says select jurisdiction, And then you can choose. Let's say the two states that are relevant here are Illinois and Michigan. So now it'll bring you right to the sections of each Q&A that relate to, in this case, breach of contract limitations. This happened to pull up Illinois first. You can toggle back and forth between the two, or you can select all, and you'll see Illinois and Michigan side by side. So I'm going to scroll back to the litigation homepage, or landing page. So that gives you a sense of how these Q&As work. Now, let's say you've determined that your case is going to take place. You're going to file suit in the state of Illinois. You know what the statute of limitations is. You want to know, how do I get started, right? You may be a litigator, you may not be, but you want to have some sense of, where do I go from here? So we'll click into Illinois litigation. And again, there's, as you can see here on the side, there are all these other jurisdictions that have content, but we're in Illinois first. Also, there's an option to click into the practice area. We're in litigation, right? We want to know about filing a lawsuit. Commencement and pleadings, you can go right to that particular topic, and it's going to pull up Illinois content, or it could be New York or California, or it could be national and federal content, whatever jurisdiction you're in. It's going to pull up all of the relevant resources relating to that specific content. So we'll just go through this sort of quickly. Practice notes, as I said before, are more detailed, practical guides to how to accomplish a task. So we'll pull up just one to give you a quick example. This is called commencing a lawsuit, initial consideration. So this is something that you would look at, before the client comes in. The client has a claim, you're trying to figure out what's the best approach. So now here you see that this is a maintained resource, which means we're reviewing it minimally once a year, but we're also reviewing it anytime any significant issue comes up. You'll also see in this italicized part here, we refer to this as the abstracts. There are also links here to, I mentioned the COVID resources that we've come up with. This is a practice note that deals specifically with how COVID impacts litigation in Illinois. And then there's this select state courts update, impact of COVID-19, deals with a variety of jurisdictions around the country.
I'm still here. I didn't say anything.
And so when you go into this, there's a table of contents on the left covering all the major headings. And it'll walk you through, what do you need to consider to take on the representation? You're going to have an initial client consultation. What do you need to discuss with the client? Do a conflicts check. And again, we're linking to, various rules. These are rules of professional conduct in Illinois, Illinois statutes. It links also to relevant practical law resources that'll help you flesh out some of the details. We also have these useful glossary terms, where if you click on one of these highlighted, bolded terms, it brings up a glossary that explains what the term means. So that gives you a sense of what a practice note involves. It gives you a lot of real practical detail about how to accomplish a task, but it also provides substantive legal research and information in the background. We're citing cases, we're explaining, in this case, the attorney-client privilege and how that impacts an organizational client versus an individual client. And there's a lot of good detailed information here. So let's go back now to the litigation homepage. You've determined that you're going to file suit in the state of Illinois. You've walked through the process of how you want to approach that. What are you going to discuss with the client? What kind of documents do you need, and so on and so forth. And you also have determined that you're going to file a breach of contract claim, right? So we have resources that deal specifically with commercial litigation. And in particular, we have resources that deal specifically with breach of contract, right? So I want to file a breach of contract complaint, but I haven't drafted one before, or it's been a while since I've drafted one. So this brings up all sorts of content related to breach of contract claims. I know I'm going to be in Illinois, so I'll scroll down to Illinois for jurisdictions, and this is going to bring up the 17 resources on breach of contract claims in Illinois. And the first one that comes up is a standard clause for a breach of contract action in the state of Illinois. So pull up that resource. And this is what Bob was talking before about standard documents. This is a standard clause, which would be a part of a larger standard document. And it shows you exactly what the pleading will look like, what you're going to file, what you have to allege. Obviously, there are blanks that you would fill in your own document. And it has these explanatory notes. We call them drafting notes. You can either click on them and look at them individually, or you can show them all. And so for each section of the document, it provides you with this background information and drafting tips and explanations. And you can see this is fairly detailed information, explaining what a breach of contract claim has to plead, the pleading standard, whether you're in state and federal court, how to use the document, provides all kinds of great information about each element of the claim, how you plead it, what you need to set out. So that's an extraordinarily useful sort of thing. It gives you both the document itself and a very careful explanation, of how to use the document. Let's go back now. We're getting a little late on time, but I want to show you just a couple of other things that can be really, really useful in this context. So we're back at the home page. We'll go to litigation. Let's say you know all those things. I mean, you know in general what you need to discuss with the client. You know what you want to plead in the complaint, but you want a quick refresher, right? You want something that's going to go through the steps very quickly. What do I need to consider before I file a lawsuit because the client's coming in tomorrow? That's where what we call checklists come in very handy. What we call checklists are checklists, right? So I'll pull up just a quick example of a checklist. Go to resource type, checklist. And scroll down to these, as you'll see, sort of parallel the practice notes. So they have very similar types of information. So we'll go down to this initial considerations checklist. And you'll see rather than having the long detailed explanation that you have in a practice note, these go bullet point by bullet point of what you need to consider when you're meeting with the client, when you're considering bringing a lawsuit, researching the claims. And they link out to more detailed resources like the practice notes that'll give you greater explanation on specific topics to the extent you need it. These are really useful, quick guide to get through information quickly. And in solo practice, efficiency and getting through things quickly is sort of a key metric. Bob mentioned toolkits. That's where you'd see all these different types of resources gathered in one place. So you can kind of pick and choose what you might want to use. We also have some other types of resources. I'll just mention very quickly. We have legal updates, which are, as the name implies, just quick information about recent cases or recent rule changes that have occurred in the federal courts, for example. So just looking at this very quickly, you've got the court and judge rules updates. This shows you any new federal rules that have come out on the local level in the past week. These are issued on a weekly basis. So they'll tell you by circuit and by district if any new rule changes have come up. We also have articles on new cases that have come down recently that may be of interest to practitioners. So those are the basic resource types. There's a large volume of content here. Our national and federal resources, I think we've got something like 6,500 litigation resources alone. There's close to 500 resources for New York State, several hundred for Illinois and California and some of these other jurisdictions. So that gives you a general sense of how useful this can be to tackle a real world problem. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mike, who will take it from there.
All right. Thanks, Dave. That was very helpful. Want to welcome everyone. My name is Mike Plambeck. I'm one of the managing editors for the real estate service with Practical Law. I've been with the company for about 8 years, started here in 2013. I was hired to build out the state-specific materials for the real estate build. Prior to that, I spent about almost 12 years in practice with a small firm in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan area. During my time there, it ranged from 3 to 7 attorneys. I've also maintained my own practice for about 5 years. And I've been in practice for a little over 18 years at this point. At this point, we'd like to introduce our final poll question, and that is, what is your clerking experience? Have you worked, as you can see, have you worked with a solo small firm, medium firm, large firm, in-house, or none of the above? All right, looks like we've got our answers. Good spread, with the majority being in the solo small firm or none of the above. Thanks for responding to that poll. Dave and Bob have done a good job of highlighting the types of resources we have and what we do and what we are. One thing I did want to sort of emphasize is that one hallmark of Practical Law is that we write in a very plain language style, very accessible, use a lot of white space. You may have seen a lot of bullets in the resources that Dave demonstrated for you. The point is that it's going to be very digestible and usable, and you can take it in a quick amount of time. You don't need to spend a lot of time like you would with a treatise trying to figure out what's going on. Our practice notes try to be less than 20 pages. A lot of them are in the 3 to 8 page range. They're usually dedicated to a single topic. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. What I want to talk about more a little bit here is how our documents interrelate with each other. They're not only integrated with Westlaw, but they're integrated with each other. And I'm going to share my screen now, if I can figure out how to do that. There we are. And I'm going to share the screen. So hopefully we are now seeing share. Hopefully we're now seeing the real estate landing page. Can somebody give me the heads up or thumbs up on that? Good deal. So you can see real estate is broken out into basically 8 topics, 6 of which are interrelated with each other: commercial and residential of either side, commercial finance, commercial leasing, residential leasing, and then both sides of the ownership, as well as, and you can think of ownership as purchase and sale. We then get into construction topics, and then real estate in corporate transactions. And what that covers is when you're buying a business and that business also happens to own the real estate. So we deal with that as well. So I mentioned that our documents are interrelated with each other. They're interrelated in 2 ways. One of which is they go through the life cycle of a particular transaction. And we also have guidance on both sides of the transaction, depending on which side you're representing, whether that's buyer, seller, landlord, or tenant, or what have you. And it's often good to, you want to review not only the documents that are there for you, for your side of the transaction, but also it's helpful to see what the other side is, where they're coming from and what they're looking for. So you can sort of anticipate their arguments and their negotiation points. The other part of that is our documents may say pro landlord or pro tenant or pro seller or pro purchaser. They're not solely for that side. There will be guidance for both sides in that document. So it's just to be clear about that. So one of the documents I want to share with you is our office leasing toolkit. So if you're drafting an office lease, this will take you through the documents you'll need, or things to consider in the different stages of the leasing process, whether that's your initial considerations and negotiations, or you're doing a letter of intent, or you're starting up, or what have you. So you've got your practice notes on that, your standard documents, and then some checklists, or pre-signed checklists. And we also have flowcharts. So I'm just going to demonstrate a flowchart very briefly. So flowchart generally is just the checklist distilled down without the citations, without all the other noise sort of interfering in the position, that allows you to sort of flow through the transaction. And they're oriented vertically typically. So that's an example of a flowchart. One thing I did want to do, and you can download this as well. One thing I did want to show on a standard document that we didn't get to, and I'll find that. Let's let's find a standard document, say a letter of intent pro tenant for an office lease. We'll let that one open up. As Dave mentioned, you've got your drafting notes. You can download the document over on the right. So download the document. If you do that, you'll get all of these things, and you can download it with, if I click on that, you can download it with just the document or with the drafting notes. So you can get it either way. If you want an actual usable document that you can just print off, fill out and print off and use, you click the open in Word function. If you open in Word, you'll just get a document that you can use and then fill out and complete. It won't have the guidance built in. So let me go back for a moment here. As I mentioned, so we've got the initial considerations. We then get the actual lease documents and security deposits, and then you get down to ending the lease, whether that's for distress or just the natural end of the term. One other example, in addition to our own forms, which again are drafted either in-house by practicing lawyers for practicing lawyers. So all of our legal editors were practicing attorneys. Our senior legal editors, minimum of 8 to 10 years, typically, usually more. So they know what they're doing, and a lot of them come from some of the biggest law firms in the country. And then you may have seen, we also have contributing authors. So we have documents that we write with people that are still in practice today. And they put their names on them. If it just says practical law, real estate, or practical litigation, that was something that was drafted in-house. We also have what's called What's Market. We have this in a bunch of different practice areas, as you can see. These are publicly filed documents, and they come with little summaries that tell you what's going on. For real estate, we do leases, and so it'll give you a lease summary, so you can kind of get an idea of what's being negotiated currently. How are the documents turning out? Again, these are publicly filed, so these are usually very large deals, very large parties that are involved. For the leases, for example, there are things that get filed with Pacer that we're pulling them off of. So that's another example. Another way our documents are interrelated are, as we mentioned, we've got the practice notes, then they flow into a checklist, then they flow into a flow chart. And so for an example of that, I'm showing you our residential foreclosure toolkit. So they walk you through the actual process of conducting a foreclosure from beginning to end. And then, so that's what the practice note does. The checklist then are the action-oriented items, so you can check them off as you do them. So, review the underlying statutes so you know what you're getting yourself into. Before beginning the foreclosure, consider alternatives, conduct a loan workout, etc. Assess the potential title issues. And again, these are action-oriented that you can check off as you do them. And then you get down to actually getting into the foreclosure itself. So whether it's judicial, prepare the complaint, here's who you need to include in it, and you can check off each thing as you do it. And then the flowchart, again, is just that graphical representation of this checklist without the links and other noise, so to speak. So, and again, we've got, as Dave mentioned, we've got our jurisdictionally neutral national or federal documents, and we've got our state-specific documents. They also work together. They don't work separate from each other. Our national or jurisdictionally neutral documents will get you about 80% of the way there, we like to say. Our state-specific documents probably get you up to 90% of the way there. They also work together with the state Q&As. Probably all of that combined probably gets you 95%, and then your own local expertise gets you across the finish line. So it gets you a very efficient way of getting your work done. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about, as Bob mentioned in his beginning introduction, that we've got some more back office type guidance that gets beyond just the actual practice, how to actually run your business and conduct your work. And so an example of that is training. Big part of your own practice is learning. And so we do, in addition to these other documents you can work with, we have training guides and presentation toolkits. These are articles, these are Q&As, these are practice notes, but there's also PowerPoint presentation materials that will walk you through kind of how to do these sorts of, these types of transactions in a very succinct way. And again, you can just download these PowerPoints. So if you're going to be conducting a like-kind exchange and you're not sure even what that is, you can go in here and look at what a 1031 is, and it'll open up the PowerPoint presentation. So if I click there, we can go to download it. This may take a second. Let's try that again. There we go. So it'll actually take us to the PowerPoint. And again, then you just, if I click on the PowerPoint right now, it's going to take me to a different screen. I'll have to stop sharing. So, but the idea is that it actually gives you some training materials as well. For back office, we've got our LOPD, our Legal Operations and Professional Development Toolkit. And this will take you through technology for law, practice of law, contract management. That includes your engagement letters and retainer agreements. It'll take you through trust accounting, ethics and responsibility, some diversity and inclusion if you're building up your practice with other attorneys. It takes you through professional development. And that's not only developing your own practice and taking care of yourself and building up your expertise and your abilities, but also how to build a client base. And then we've got some videos actually as well that will, I click on the table of contents, take you down there. So on some substantive issues, we've got different videos you can watch that will help you with some of this stuff as well. Data privacy, as an example, employee benefits, and things like that. So the final thing I wanted to show you is a tool we've got called Practical Law Community. This is developed specifically for small and solo practitioners. It's kind of like a social media site where you can actually ask questions. It's a community or a group of, we've got several thousand users that can post questions and discussions. You can break it down by topic. And so you can have someone down here says, I'd like to see some additional Virginia resources, or litigators wondering how COVID-19 emergency orders are still affecting your state's schedules. These are so you can get responses and discussions going on as to if you've got a particular matter. And again, if you don't find it in practical law proper, you can ask a question and perhaps get some responses from other attorneys that are out there in practice. These are actual subscribers. These are not internal employees necessarily. There are some as well, but this is also subscribers. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. And I'm going to turn this over. It's for questions.
So Mike, this is Bob. I see a question that we actually get asked a lot. It's a really great question by Tyler Westman Conroy that I would like to address.
Sure.
His question is, should we be concerned if we don't see our state listed? So as mentioned, certain of the larger, most populous states have more robust state-specific content, but this is where Mike's mention and Dave's mention of national content comes in handy. And I want to just sort of relate one of my own personal experiences. When I was a young attorney at my firm, I often did work in areas that I was not familiar with. And I remember one time the employment litigation head came to me and said, I need a motion for summary judgment. Could you draft one for me? Now, anyone with any bit of experience in litigation knows motion for summary judgment are big, huge, crazy, documents with many steps and many submissions and lots of rules. And so I went to the practice guides because, no matter what area you guys practice in, you'll probably purchase the practice guides in your state that are most commonly used. And for us in California, it was the Rudder Civil Trials and Litigation, Civil Procedure, which is 3 volumes of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. And the motion for summary judgment section was, I kid you not, like 100, 200 pages long of like statutes and just crazy stuff. So I didn't even understand what a motion for summary judgment was. I went to I wasn't going to go to the attorney and say, I don't even know what this is. I looked at the table of contents. I sort of gutted it out, made a lot of mistakes along the way that I was chastised for. But, if I was in a state where we don't have robust practical law content, I could have gone to the national resources. Because the national resources, as Mike was mentioning, all of the resources that are built jurisdictionally are built nationally. And the national will walk you through the considerations, the things you need to be thinking about. And I remember getting chastised by the judge because I didn't realize there was a page limitation to a certain document. So if I had national content, if I had the ability to really walk through without having to go through 200 pages in my own practice guide, understand the overview, the process, the things I need to be looking out for. Look out for page limitations. Here are the considerations when you're making your argument. Here's how to, formatting issues, consider A, consider B, consider C. So even if you go for a trial run of practical law, you're wondering, is this product right for me? Is it going to be useful? And you're in a state like Arizona or South Dakota or Maine, where we might not have as robust a build in your specific area, your practice guides combined with the national content, which is all of that good jurisdictional stuff, but just without the specific law, is still going to be invaluable in getting you up to speed quickly, making sure you're not forgetting issues, understanding the scope of a transaction, the steps of a transaction, what I need to do in these various litigation things. So
Plus the state Q&As as well.
Plus there are some resources in those jurisdictions. So I would urge you to check out the national content as well, because that's going to have a lot of invaluable nuggets for you guys.
Yeah, and Bob, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we have coverage in, depending on the practice area, it ranges from 8 to I think 17 states where we have that robust offering where it's actually listed as a separate state. So I think litigation, you've got 8 or 9 jurisdictions. Real estate, I think, has 11 jurisdictions listed. I think corporate and commercial both have like 17 jurisdictions. It's a matter of, and that's where we have the staff to be able to build out those robust offerings. Then for the ones where we don't, that's when we get the contributors involved. That's where we get that's where we have the state Q&A coverage, and it's just we're working on it. It's basically
right. And in those national and federal guides, similar to what Bob was saying earlier too, is that you will see, in other words, it won't say this is exactly what you have to do in every state. It will mention here are some, basic rules. Here are the majority of states follow this, or the federal rules provide that, but it will highlight where you should look for things that might deviate. Then, some jurisdictions handle these matters differently, and it'll kind of clue you into where you need to look for a specific answer if it's not covered in that more general discussion of a topic. So that's actually really useful in itself, because it highlights, in litigation, a lot of states follow the federal rules of civil procedure. They have their own rules, but they're very similar to that. But not every state does. And you can find, specific areas where you need to make sure that you're looking at your own jurisdiction to ensure that it follows the framework that's set out in the national and federal guidance. And that's really, really useful. I just wanted to point out that we do have a couple of questions coming in.
I wanted to get a few of those. I want to reiterate before we get to those questions that we are not salespeople. We're not involved in the sales process at all. We're the editors. We're the ones involved. We're responsible for creating this content and getting it published. I see 2 questions that are related. One, does Practical Law come with all of the Westlaw plans? And 2, does Practical Law come as a standalone module? Those are sales questions, but does it come with all Westlaw plans? Yes, with limitations. I think it depends what you're looking at. And again, those are sales things that either we don't know or we don't get into. And I believe you can buy Practical Law as a standalone, although you would not then get the benefit of the Westlaw integration.
Linking out to Westlaw, right?
Yeah, they have bundles, so they have economies of scale if you were to purchase both Westlaw and Practical Law. It's not, there's no cost to download individual documents. Once you have Practical Law, you have access to the whole thing. You get the whole suite, being able to download, being able to edit documents, being able to download Word versions that you can actually work in. So it's actually I believe a monthly charge, but on the slide in front of you, there's sales information. Grab that telephone number. They'll be able specifically, based upon what state you're in, you know, and a variety of other considerations, they'll be able to get.
Yeah, we can't, there's a question here about, well, we talk about the cost of service. We can't get into that. A, we don't have the information, and B, it's not something we can get into.
Kim, there's a question about the link where we can watch the 2-part of the Solo Practitioner series again. Is there a way, I don't know if you can, someone can put that in the chat, or that link will go out to everybody who's registered?
Kim, yes. Molly will be posting that along with the survey if she hasn't already done so.
Excellent. And I'd like to say, you know, it's a pleasure talking with you today and allowing us to present for you. All of our emails are up. If you have any questions about practical law, or even not about practical law, but about being an attorney and the practice of law, and for example, trust and estates for me, or a litigation for Dave, or real estate for Mike, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Happy to answer any questions, practical law related or not. We were all in exactly the same spot that you are in now. It's a really exciting and nerve-wracking time. So, you know, congrats on making it almost through law school. And that's it for me. Dave, Mike, do you have any final words?
No, I would just reiterate what you just said. Feel free to contact me anytime. You know, as I said, I spent roughly 15 years in solo practice on top of a lot of time in firms. So more than happy to talk practical law, solo practice, or anything related thereto.
Likewise, I'm happy to answer any questions. It's been a pleasure being here, and I hope you guys got something out of this. This was fun to do.